Why did Elysium attack Pythosia, you ask? What did you hear? Because Pythosia sent her assassin to kill Callista, right? What if I told you that's not what happened? What if I told you what really happened? And where you might find £96 million worth of gold. Ha, yes. For a cup of that wine you got over there, I'll tell you the real story. And if you believe me, which you won't, but if you do, we can then talk about where we might recover this astronomical amount of gold. What? Nikos exclaimed, slightly aggravated at Eason's pushy excitement. Shut the door. Eason waved with his hand. I have something you have to see. Nikos shut the door and then took a folded arm stance. Eason ignored him and took the center of the room. Watch this, Eason said with a grin. Out from behind him, he pulled an odd bronze cone-shaped item. It had the face of a laughing baby worked into the middle of it, and on top the baby's head was a cone-shaped hat. Nikos had no idea what it was, but when Eason positioned it above his head, Nikos realized it must be a bizarre dress hat. You ready? Eason asked, eyed gleaming. Slowly, Eason lowered the hat to his head. At once, Eason disappeared, and in his place appeared Eason's obnoxiously giant wooden chair. Nikos stood stunned, blinking in confusion. He glanced back at Eason's giant wooden chair, thinking perhaps it moved, but nope. The chair was in place. But an exact copy of the chair now stood in the center of the room, where Eason was standing. Nikos glanced around and then circled the chair. He reached out and touched it. Funny, he yelled. Where did you go? He glanced around again and then re-examined the chair. He sat down in it for a second and then stood up, circling the chair in suspicion. Okay, he yelled. That was cool, trying to get Eason to re-emerge from wherever he went. Nikos grabbed the side of the chair and shoved it, thinking maybe a trap door was beneath the chair. But just then, the chair turned back into Eason, causing him to jump in fright. Hoo! Eason cried, catching his bizarre bronze hat as it fell from his head. He laughed, seeing the shocked, frightened look on Nikos' face. Ha! He laughed. How about that? Nikos stood completely perplexed. It's the hat, Eason said with the excited whisper. It's magic. He handed it to Nikos, who held it like could possibly bite him. Where did you get it? Blackwell, Eason replied. They showed up at my door a few months ago. With the horse masks? Nikos asked. Yeah, the hat turns you into anything you can see, but it has to be roughly your size. You can't turn into a small cup or anything, and you have to be looking at it, at least at first. But the problem is, like you saw, if someone moves you and the hat falls off, the spell breaks. Nikos took a long time to respond. He stood there stunned, processing what just happened. Then he spoke. Can't you just hold it on with your hands? He asked. Nope. Spell breaks as soon as you touch it, and it has to be on your bare head. Fitting it over a hood don't work, but hair is fine, I guess, so you got to be a little careful. Eason finished with a grin from ear to ear. Huh? Cool, huh? I've been having so much fun. I figured I'd bring you in on it a bit, but swear you won't tell anyone. I mean for real. Nikos stood stunned. He didn't know what to say. He just stood there with his mind locked, incapable of responding. You said you've been having fun, Nikos finally replied. Eason nodded deeply with a grin. Big fun. I started small, watching myself in the mirror. I had to figure out what I looked like and what I could do. I first turned myself into a small tree along the road. Then I moved on to barrels at the marketplace, and then a fruit cart. I turned myself into a wheelbarrow, but a guy tried to run off with me, knocking my hat off. Scared him so bad I think he wet his pants. But the real fun is in the bathhouse. I turned myself into a tub and had myself a nice peek a few times. You can feel it when people touch you, but it's weird. It's not always clear where you feel 'em, but you feel 'em, he said with a grin. After a few weeks of playing around and testing their limits, it didn't take long for the two to realize the most fruitful location of their newfound abilities was at court. Among the nobles, and even the king, one could sit unseen and hear all manner of juicy things that might be valuable. We could sell secrets, Eason suggested. Maybe we could even be hired by the Crown as paid spies. But that was risky, they both agreed. Too bad we can't turn into a pile of gold and sell ourselves, Eason joked. But the suggestion hit Nikos like a bolt of lightning. He sprung up eyes wide with the idea. Yes! Yes! But I'd need a pile as big as me. I've never seen that much gold, Eason countered. Yes, you have. And you'll see it again. The Spring Festival. The Maramuk at the Spring Festival, Nikos stated confidently. The Spring God, Eason replied with fear. He'll get angry and curse us. Come on, Nikos shot back, incredulously rolling his eyes. It's just a statue with a big golden cock, and that cock could get us the fuck out of here. We could be set for the rest of our lives. Eason stood stunned at the suggestion, but the idea was starting to sink in. It's not like we're stealing the real Maramuk, Eason mumbled. He wouldn't care, right? But who would we sell it to? I bet the men of Elysium would pay a good price. They haven't had a good harvest in years. Plus, I hear Princess Calliope is having trouble getting pregnant. Leave this to me. I know a bunch of guys there. I can ask around. But this could be it. Rich beyond our wildest dreams. Nikos finished with a clenched fist and a smile. The plan was simple. Eason would sit in a covered wagon beside the road. When Maramuk's procession came by, Eason would peek through the cart slits and place the hat on his head. Then Nikos would simply drive the cart to Elysium and sell Eason to his contact. Once Nikos was a safe distance from Elysium and Eason was in the clear, he could take off the hat, make his escape, and meet Nikos at the rendezvous point. Clean, simple, a perfect plan. And perfect it went. Nikos could barely believe this was actually happening as they loaded the gold onto his wagon. So heavy was his load, the two horses were forced to lean in just to get the wagon moving. Nikos took a dry swallow as his wheels squeaked through the front gate, and he suddenly became painfully aware him and his clueless young driver were the only things between anyone with a sword and an absolute fortune. Meanwhile, back in Elysium, the royal guards were escorting their new fertility idol into its final hidden destination. Eason didn't like the looks of where he was being placed. He expected to be escorted into an open temple. But this was a windowless storage unit. Right there is fine, a young woman commanded, waving her hand. She was well dressed and obviously used to ordering men around. The men bowed and receded. The woman gazed with a pleased smile at Eason, making him for the first time feel suddenly self-conscious. Princess, one of the guards said, waiting for orders. Just leave, she spat, waving her hand. Wait outside. This has to be Princess Calliope, Eason thought. Rumor had it she was barren, and Eason got the feeling that was why she stood so interested before him. The door shut, and now they were alone. The princess stood before him, eyeing him with excitement. She caressed his face and shoulders. Eason kind of expected this. It was said that simply touching the golden Maramuk was enough to open a woman's womb. So many barren women sought to just touch the statue, so surely a lengthy caress was more than adequate to reach peak fertility. But then her hand slipped down below Eason's waist. She is not, he thought with mouth-gaped amazement. Fondling Maramuks. In any other circumstance he might have enjoyed the unexpected taboo of this scene, but the danger of this situation was too high. Okay. You got your rub. You can leave now, Eason thought, hoping the intensity of his will would shoo her out the door. But she continued. And then... She turned around and gathered up her long skirt. What is she doing? Eason thought tearfully, feeling himself starting to sweat. And then she did it. Sat back onto Eason, impaling herself onto Maramuk's golden member. Oh my God, she is not. Eason thought, glancing back and forth as if somehow he could be seen. But she continued, and her movements became stronger and stronger. She moaned, and Eason cried, praying desperately to escape this situation. And then it happened. She thrust herself back with such force, Eason stumbled, and his hat fell off. A blood-curdling shriek could be heard through the castle. In a desperate move, Eason covered her mouth, but she struggled and shrieked again. Knowing death was just outside the door, Eason, in a desperate move to silence the hysterical princess, grabbed a stone and slammed it against her head. A sweep of relief crashed over Aeson as her cries for help stopped. But his relief was brief, for guards came crashing through the door. "Wait! Wait! Wait!" Aeson cried, dropping the stone. The guards glanced down at the princess now laying still in a pool of blood and responded with extreme prejudice, each thrusting their spear with all their might through Aeson's shaking body. Aeson slumped to the ground, tearful vision fading, now wishing he had just stayed in Pythosia and kept the hat to himself. Elysium marched on Pythosia 3 days later. Pythosia was caught completely off guard and fell quick. When they found the real statue of Maramuk, they were convinced the king and officials of Pythosia were behind the conspiracy, so they killed everyone and burnt the city to the ground, taking Maramuk and all Pythosia's wealth back to Elysium. The princess recovered and ironically got pregnant that same week. "And that's what really happened," Zenon ended confidently. "What happened to that wagon of gold? And how do you know all this? How is it only you know the truth?" the pirate asked, laughing with an incredulous snorting scoff at the fantastical story. Zenon smiled, expecting the disbelief. He then turned and looked, drawing attention to the cowering young man at his side. "A few months later we happened to recover the driver of the wagon, throwing gold around like he was a prince. I have an idea where our fortune is now, and with your help we will both soon be very rich." "Still not convinced?" Zenon asserted with a grin. He then turned to his sack and re-emerged with a bronze cone hat. The hat had a laughing baby face carved into the center. Grinning from ear to ear, he raised it dramatically above his head and lowered it slowly. Gasps and a cry echoed through the forest as Zenon disappeared before them, and in his place burned a bonfire, flames dancing in perfect lockstep with the fire just beside it.